Okay, good morning and welcome to CABB Notes for February 2020. And this morning, um, Barbara Trueweber was hoping to be here, and she actually organized this panel, um, but she's still fighting off the flu a little bit. So we're going to be talking today roughly about what does Greta Thunberg want us to do? And I was thinking that various political events have sidetracked some of our thoughts as far as the climate crisis is concerned, and it seems to me that we have to keep the climate crisis on the front burner for sure until something significant is done about it. So we have Bill and Jim and Bruce here who are certainly very steeped in the concern for the climate. Jim, why don't we start with you, and you can just give us a little idea about what the BCRC's focuses are concerning climate.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Nathan. Yeah, and I work with both of these guys too through the Regional Planning Commission. But yeah, my name is Jim Sullivan. I'm the director of the Bennington County Regional Commission, and you know, we do comprehensive planning work for most of the towns and villages in Bennington County, and certainly a lot of the focus of our work in recent years has involved energy planning and issues related to energy planning across from land use planning to transportation planning and everything in between that involves what kind of energy we use and how much we use and how we try to do it more efficiently and be conscious of what we're doing. We've developed regional energy plans and worked with a lot of our member municipalities to develop local energy plans, and all those plans contain implementation strategies, which I think goes right to what Greta and folks are telling us to do, which is we have to take action locally. And so we're very fortunate that over the last year or so, many of the towns in our region, I think in response to global concerns and also the work that's been done locally, have formed local energy committees, and those we're working now very frequently with those local energy committees to roll out some projects and initiatives, and really in a lot of ways just to try to get information out there to folks in the communities about what they can do, what types of programs and incentives and things are out there for them to take advantage of to help save energy and convert to more sustainable energy.
Yeah. So Bill, I just heard that you're downsizing, and I assume that's partly in response to try to be have a smaller footprint, as it were. Give us a little detail about that.
Well, we still live in the house that we raised a family in, and it's too big for us, and we've done everything we can to make it energy efficient. That's my business, so I really went overboard on it. I got a tank of oil about 3 or 4 years ago and thought, I hope this is my last tank of oil, and I think it will be.
Oh, wow.
So,
yeah.
But still, I burn a fair amount of wood as well, and it's a house that's more appropriate for a bigger family. So we're moving into something smaller and even more energy efficient, where we won't be burning a lot of wood, because that's wood is better than oil, in my opinion. We got good data to back that up, but still, it'd be nice to not be burning anything, to sit there and stay warm in a super insulated house. So with just solar. So that's the plan. But we're all doing various things in our own ways. But it's there's just so much more to do, because that's just like with that's only one aspect of my life. I fly a lot for work, and that's a huge oil use. And justify that, which isn't necessarily good. I'll put quotes around that, but I justify it by the fact that I'm saving a huge amount of energy with my work. So that I could say that cancels out, again, quote unquote,
Yeah.
the oil that I'm burning when I fly cross country. But we very few of us have a really small carbon footprint. Some are bigger than others. We're all doing what we can, but we really, almost all Americans need to do a lot more. And there are people who are very poor and have a very small carbon footprint. My son said that the answer to sustainability is poverty, which is a kind of a bleak way to look at it, but very poor people don't use a lot of resources. They're not, if you don't have a car, it's not I have a really efficient car, or I have an inefficient car. If you're a Vietnamese rice farmer and you don't own a car and you don't have electricity and you don't, you're using very little energy. So all of us that are living a higher lifestyle have an extra amount of work to do, extra responsibility.
Yeah. So Bruce, you've been involved in this for quite a while.
Yes, I'm now serving on the Bennington Energy Committee. As Jim described, I think practically all the towns now in Bennington County have an energy committee or are working toward having one. And as you might expect, most of the work of the Energy Committee is to try to determine if there's ways as a community that we could save energy. And of course you start with things like municipal buildings and the vehicles that the town buys, those kinds of things. But as we've discovered just in the few months we've been operating so far, a lot of it has to do with how the community uses energy and trying to help the residents, as Jim said, to find more efficient ways to do what they need to do. So and I'd also reemphasize what Jim said about communication being one of the biggest challenges, because we're finding more and more programs that could really help people, particularly with the weatherization of their houses, which is probably the biggest gain in terms of investment that we could make. In terms of, switching to a more efficient car, or in terms of switching to a more efficient heating used in your home, those really don't compare in terms of the return on investment of just weatherizing your house.
Is that right?
It's not very sexy stuff, but it really is the thing that leads to a lot more energy efficiency. So actually in Bennington, from what we've studied so far, we're in pretty good shape in terms of knowing what our energy use is in our municipal buildings and with our vehicle pool and what we use energy for. We've had audits. Some initiatives have begun, but what we're really trying to find out now is, well, where do those initiatives stand now? And what's the next step for us to go forward in our municipal buildings? But the other thing we need to do is, well, what's the next step in trying to pull the community into this energy saving effort? And again, that involves a lot of communication. None of us are social media whizzes, that's for sure, and so we're trying to figure out how we can more effectively tell the community what's available to them in terms of weatherization. There are some really innovative, really low-cost programs that can save a lot of energy. One of the ones we've gotten most enthusiastic about recently is called window dressers, which is a program to make internal storm windows for your house. And it's a volunteer effort. Volunteers help you measure the windows, help you, we set up a central workshop, and they help you actually build them to go into your house. And they just pop in. There's no carpentry work to do to install them. But they can save a lot of energy. So that program's already been started in many communities in Maine. We're trying to get it organized here probably for this summer so that going into the fall people can benefit from these programs. So those, but it's just the fact that when people know about those things and when you make it easy for them to engage with it,
Yeah.
that really is what spreads it throughout the community and helps everybody benefit. So I think that's what we're finding on, as far as the Energy Committee is concerned, is a big part, going to be a big part of our mission, is trying to get that word out to people and to reduce some of the barriers to finding out who you should call,
Yeah.
or who can come help come help me figure out what I need to do. Those kinds of things are the real barriers. We're going to try to be working, I think, on doing that. That's just what I see as a committee. That's not a full official report from the committee, but it's just what I've seen as we've been operating for the last 4 months.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah. So you're involved in some of the energy-saving types of projects too?
Oh, yeah, sure. We were talking about the window dresser program actually at a meeting yesterday, and trying to coordinate that through the regional commission in Bennington County. There's a lot of interest in it around the state, so we're hoping to get kind of a targeted effort in our area. And I think it'll be, if we get it, and I hope we do, I think it'll be a great opportunity to kind of provide some continuity and ongoing communication between all of the local energy committees, kind of working on a common project, and while they're doing that, can share information about other things that are being done as well. And what my friends here have said about where our challenges are is absolutely true. I mean, and we did a lot of analysis of energy data as we were working our way through the regional and town plans, and it's kind of overwhelming if you look at the whole numbers of what we need to do to realize the energy savings and the greenhouse gas emission reductions that are our state national targets, and they are they're a lot, but if we start working on them as we can, that's the only way to make progress. And the big areas to look at definitely are space heating, how much energy we use to heat buildings, and especially residential buildings. That's most of the space in our region is that, and there's an awful lot of energy inefficient buildings, but at the same time there's a lot of really good programs to help folks tighten up their buildings and convert to alternative heating systems. The BROC, the Bennington Rutland Opportunity Council, is the weatherization assistance provider for the area for income eligible residents. They basically provide free weatherization services for people. So that's something we got. People hear that and they're like, really? Free? Free? Right. Like, yes, free.
I can afford that.
Really, that's a good deal. And NeighborWorks of Western Vermont is also in there, and they provide a whole menu of weatherization assistance for homeowners. So there's a lot of really good organizations working in providing incentives, and Efficiency Vermont is involved in a lot of those weatherization incentives as well. And the other big one is in the transportation sector. When we talk about our energy use and our greenhouse gas issues, the transportation sector is the biggest actually, and in a lot of ways it's proven to be the hardest one to really get a handle on. And the solutions, there's a lot of good programs, and there's going to be even better programs, I think, for electric vehicle purchases and things like that. But it's a bigger challenge than that. It's really, I think it involves people changing the way they think about how they get around, and ultimately, where they live and things too. So trying to encourage in our land use planning really attractive, desirable, compact centers where a lot of stuff that people want to do are all within walking distance. So you live in town and you can walk to the store, and you walk to school, walk to work, or take a bike, or public transportation becomes a lot easier if things aren't spread out all over the countryside too. You recognize that Vermont still, is a rural state, and there's a lot of, folks that are going to live in rural areas. So we have to figure out how to make that work for them too. So it's I guess my whole point with that is transportation is complicated, and it involves a lot of things. It certainly involves electric vehicles, but it also involves public transportation and bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and like I said, how and where we live. So I sort of had my 3-point program on
fighting the climate crisis was, number one, you grow as much of your own food as you can, you know, and see, what was number two?
Well, number one's a good one because people kind of forget about that in the context of energy and climate. But that's a really, really local food sources are really important.
Yeah, and then I guess number two was to heat with as little bit of fossil fuel as you can. We get our 4 cords of wood in the fall, or fortunately our daughter comes and stacks it up for us. And right now we're a little horrified at how much of the wood is gone. And you know, we're just in the middle of February, you know, and winter's not over yet. So we called up our wood supplier, and he said, well, you could take some of that wood I just brought for the following year and put it next to your stove and use some of that. Yeah, so, and then the third thing was stay home.
Yes.
So, of course, I have a situation where my wife has Parkinson's, so I pretty much have to stay home anyway. I'm not sure whether I'd have enough self-discipline to stay home if I had the same money at my son-in-law has. You know, they're over visiting in Israel right now, or stay home in relation to one daughter who likes to drive out to west to work in the summertime and drives back, and she now has 350,000 miles on her Subaru. So, you know, trying to decide how much I should try to put pressure on people to, even the people closest to me, to stay home is a difficult thing. So, Bill, I'm interested in knowing how will you heat your future living space?
Most of it was very old school solar thermal, like the hot water panels that were so popular in the 70s. That will heat a heavy radiant floor. So it's a kind of a simple system, but I'll be making it more complicated because that's simple, but the comfort isn't great because you don't have, with a very simple system, you have no temperature control. That if you have a heavy enough floor, it modulates the temperatures, but the floor gets hot on a sunny day and it gets cold when it's been cloudy for a while. So I'm going to make it a little more complicated with some storage and control so that I can even things out more, because those even out a little bit from the weight of the floor, but still that won't really do it 100%. So we're going to try to keep the temperature more even, and that'll be the primary source. And then for backup, we're not really sure. We may do without backup of any sort at all, because our house would never get colder than people I know keep their house all the time to save oil. I know people who keep their house at 50 because they can't afford to heat it, and so my house would never drop below 50, so I could just say, well, what am I complaining about? I can do better than that. But a little air source heat pump or something we might put in depending on the need, or a tiny wood stove. The trouble with if you call it a trouble with a super insulated house is that wood becomes real overkill, because it's hard to, the smallest normal wood stoves are way too big for a really well insulated house. And so we're looking at maybe like a comically small wood stove.
Burn matchsticks.
Yeah, just about. They make tiny little things that, and I don't know much about them, so I'd have to know more to see if that's really a practical idea. I don't want to be the first one to try this.
So there's certainly a big opportunity here for innovation, and a lot of
and actually, and I missed one thing, is just good south-facing windows will actually be a very big part of our heat, because proper windows. A south-facing window is the most efficient solar collector made. Which people don't realize. It's almost 100%. When it's open, all the sun that comes in heats your house, and only a little goes back out. And then you close it up at night, and you're just really doing great. people make mistakes with overdoing it, and then it's cold at night with all the windows, and it gets too hot during the day, and all sorts of things like that. But a fairly normal house, just making really good use of your windows, if you do the calculations, most people use a lot less energy than the numbers say to heat their house. And you think, well, how come, you do all the math and you say, how come they're only using 600 gallons a year? And it's because of their windows. You forget all the heat that comes in. Even normal windows makes a really big difference. And then if you make smarter use of them by use these like these inserts or really good shutters and shades and things, and keeping them clean and keeping the brush away and let that sun in, and then close up the ones on the north side. Just a normal house can really shift their energy use, really save a lot just with smart use of your windows instead of just thinking of it as a thing to look out.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I was gonna comment on that, and you beat me to it because I haven't done all the calculations, but I suspect that it probably we get most of the heat for our house from our windows. Like today is the day where the temperature is going to be in the single digits, I think, outside most of the day, and with the sun shining, though, there's no heat source inside my house. And I'll get home after work today, and the temperature will be 70 degrees in the house, because of the south-facing windows. And it's combined with weatherization, and that's the thing that people can do. You don't have to build a new house to do that. Take advantage of those existing south-facing windows and do those window treatments and the weatherization work to keep the drafts out of your house. And as Bill said, you'd be amazed at how much you're saving and how much more comfortable the house is without doing anything other than taking advantage of the natural heat source that's 93 million miles away, but it does a great job. So.
Yeah, we have a. It reminds me that our master bedroom just has two conventional size windows facing to the south. And when we retrofitted heat pumps to our house, we put one in there because we thought probably as much for cooling in the summer as for heating in the winter that would be good. But in terms of a heat source, it really is absolutely unnecessary.
Wow!
Because there's enough heat from just the regular 30 by 60 south-facing windows.
Yeah.
It heats up there during the day higher than any of the thermostats. They said it was 71 degrees in there yesterday when I went in. And it's simple. You don't really think about it, and admittedly, that's also because it's on the second floor. It's a loft really, and with the heat from there, it's basically self-sufficient on heat. Have to keep the shades down in the summer, but during the winter, it works just fine. One more thing I was going to put out. I'm reflecting on something Bill said. We think of the way we live right now as a high standard of living, without thinking of what we have lost in many ways by becoming very dependent on fossil fuels and dependent on motor vehicles for transportation. If you look at some of these older pictures in the that are shown in the banner on a daily basis, we used to have a public transportation system in Bennington that worked very well, and if you lived in Old Bennington and needed to go into town, there would be a streetcar by in a few minutes that you could take downtown. When you think about that in terms of having to get into your car, drive downtown, and find a place to park it, have we really gained a lot by having that motor vehicle? And you look at all the activity that was going on in the street too. In terms of a community, the idea of having that kind of mixed-use transportation and the public transportation involved right there in the city street made a basis for a community and for the businesses that surrounded it. So it's part of this, it's really a transition of mindset. That is what Greta wants us to do. She wants us to change our mind about what is a good standard of living. And it's a difficult message to get across. People think, well, I want to go back to the past. You know, there's disease and the streets didn't get shoveled and like that. But we know more now, and we have more information about how we could build communities that wouldn't need to forsake some of those things that we had that were strong aspects of the community in the past. But it's trying to change our minds about what is a rich life. That is the most difficult thing.
Yeah, I think the community building type of thing where I always think, well, gee, our neighbors are here. Did we ever go to visit Lynn or go to visit Mary Lou? Or we never went to see. We've been there 50 years. No, we haven't even been in those houses next door. No, it's regrettable. The one thing that appeals to me too is the idea of these maker spaces.
Yes.
You know, the idea that you have somebody's empty garage that you can sort of refurbish with a few tools and maybe some heat. And anytime you have some kind of a project that's a little beyond you, you know, you can't quite get your lawnmower sharpened right, or you can't fix some kind of a kitchen implement that broke, you know, you'd go to the maker space, and among all the people who gather there, somebody would be able to give you some idea about how to fix it.
Yeah, I think, you know, maker spaces, co-working spaces, like, you know, we have Bennington area makers and Lightning Jar. They're really a workplace example of community that you're talking about. I mean, it's people getting together, getting to know each other, sharing ideas and resources, and it does you know, kind of reflect on, you know, the kind of thing we're trying to encourage and promote. And I think what people really want, you know, nowadays. I think, you know, for a long time we didn't really think about it. The kind of like the post World War II love affair that began with the personal automobile kind of really changed the way we live. It pushed settlements out and into the countryside and dispersed, and, you know, everybody, you know, would get, you know, go from their house in the morning into their car in their garage, you know, drive 10 miles to work, you know, park, get into their, drive back home into their garage, go in their house, never look outside, you know, never interact with or see their neighbors. And so we're really trying to get back to, like, well, let's put things closer together. And when we're thinking about how we build communities or you know, renovate or retrofit to get back to the way we were, let's do things like, you know, like have houses closer to the street and front porches and things like that to, you know, to get people communicating and encourage people to walk on sidewalks to around neighborhoods and into town. And it's, you know, it's good for community, it's good for public health, it's good for energy. It has tremendous benefits. So it's you know, we drifted away from that, you know, and now it's a lot of work to get back toward it. And as Bruce said, you know, sometimes we look at all the modern conveniences that we have now and we go, we'd hate to go back. But if you look at, you know, some of the things that we had that we could get back, it's like, wow, we really would all benefit from that.
Yeah, just the idea, like the river walkway we have here in Bennington, you know, the idea that, you know, you go there and walk up and down along the stream there and cool off in the summertime or enjoy the sound of the water running through.
Yeah, I mean, our transportation planner is always fond of talking about the you know, the public health benefits of more walkable and bikeable communities. We've become so sedentary, you know, is relying on plunking ourselves down in our car to get everywhere. It's like, hey, you know, if you just go out and walk or ride your bike for 30 minutes, 40 minutes a day, you know, the health of the community improves, you know, notably. It really does.
Yeah.
Yes, I was impressed today as I was leaving to come here. He was coming in on his bicycle, and I have to say, the temperature is about 8 degrees outside. So he's a kudos to him. He practices what he preaches.
Yeah, that's the kind of transition that people have to make to just get out there. One thing that a friend of mine says is that, we've had these marathons, from here to Manchester or wherever they go, and they tend to be sort of elitist groups, and he was wondering whether we couldn't have some kind of activities. I guess there are some that verge on that include the whole spectrum, socioeconomic spectrum, people who are, not well off, as well as the people who are very well off. And somehow, just create a more community spirit type of commonality, which makes it easier for everybody to
Sure.
do what makes sense.
I think I agree. I'm often thinking about, what could we do that would be sort of a coalescing community activity?
Yeah.
A softball league or something like that would draw in people from more areas. In some ways, it's naive for me to think that way, because when we talk about energy, one of the things I think we've become much more aware of is that the energy burden, the cost of energy, is not shared equally. And if you're working 6 days a week already, the idea of a recreational activity of going out, in part of the community may not be as attractive to you as it is somebody who's working a 40-hour week. And I think that's something we have to keep in mind. But but I'm open to suggestions as to how we might find activities that would both involve the community and provide more resources for energy conservation, weatherization, that sort of thing. That's why I agree the maker spaces are a great idea in terms of how you could use the community engagement and the resources of the community to try to even out the burden that we share as far as energy is concerned. I think that's another big part of what we see as the energy crisis, and I think Greta Thunberg tries to point out is that you're sitting here in these boardrooms in a soft chair making all these decisions without really much thought about all the people who are suffering elsewhere because you're so slow in trying to adjust the equity of the way energy is used and marketed. So I think that's a big part of the challenge we face too, is trying to think of ways that it doesn't have to be anything dramatic. Like I say, it's something that involves the community, but that again could perhaps involve more people and reduce some of the energy burden that's disproportionately on those who have less income. I'm a bicyclist too. Of course, one of the things we think about is, well, what if we had a workshop to recondition bicycles or help people fix up their bicycles? And I think that's coming too. I think you'll see more activity of that kind, perhaps associated with the makerspace in the next year or so, where we try to pull people together to, here's probably the greatest tool ever invented for solving short distance transportation problems, and it's woefully underused. Maybe we can help people overcome some of the barriers to thinking about a bicycle as a real transportation device rather than a recreational device.
Because I think it's a good point. It was pointed out to me once a while back, and I hadn't really thought of it. But yeah, bicycles weren't invented to be in the Tour de France, or for us to slip on our slinky, spandex lycra bicycle racing outfits and ride around the countryside. They were really invented to help people move around more easily and efficiently. They were a transportation mode, and we kind of forgot that, and it got to the point where they became toys for either kids or grown-ups, and I think we could go a long way toward again helping everybody out if we recognize the value of the bicycle as a transportation mode.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not ready to do 8 degrees yet, but down to 20, I'll consider it. It's about but I don't go
Yeah.
I don't go cross country skiing when it's 8 degrees either. If I can avoid it, I admit I'm soft in that way.
One thing that occurs to me over and over again is the balance of activity, you might call it. When you look at all these professional sports, there's 100,000 people sitting in the stadium, watching someone else play a game. And the mental attitude about sitting, watching somebody do something. I mean, how often does somebody sit down and watch you work? Or
How about watching people play video games? That's become a big thing. I
Oh.
find that people will go and sit in a stadium and watch people playing video games.
Is
Which
that
is
right?
like the next step. I can't. That doesn't fit into my brain how that happens, but apparently it does. But much more common is that the idea that sports is mostly spectators now. I mean, we should all be out there making fools of ourselves, just doing what we can. This is so much more valuable than sitting and watching someone else do it. So, oh well.
yeah.
Yeah, but you don't have to be good at it to play it, So
Here,
I've demonstrated that in all of my athletic endeavors throughout my lifetime. So it's still fun.
Yeah, I think this whole glorification of the gold medal winners and that sort of thing, really does, in a way, deter a lot of people from say, well, I can't possibly broad jump 26 feet. So why should I even try it? So how do you change that mindset? How do we become less of a spectator? Public want to be.
I think a lot of it, goes back to trying to encourage generally more active lifestyle. I think if people get out, and if the reason that folks are getting out and moving around is just because it's the most convenient way to to go pick up dinner for the night, to walk down to the corner store and get some food and walk back instead of driving their car somewhere, then that's a great start at getting people to think about and to say, hey, I actually feel pretty good doing this. So I think just encouraging people to get out and exercise a little bit every day. Just doing everyday activities is a great start. Or you talked about local food and agriculture, just like growing some, getting involved in backyard gardening or working in a community garden. I mean, again, that's a great way to save energy and a great way to get more, physically active and start to appreciate what your body can do again. So, yeah.
I remember one, I don't know whether it was before work or noontime or sometime, I was sitting in the garden. We had that garden plot next to Park McCullough House there. And it was a hot summer day. I guess I was harvesting potatoes. I was just sitting there in the ground with a rake or something. I'd pull potatoes in, and it's just a great feeling of warmth and fulfillment and peace. Here I'm just harvesting potatoes. Nothing greater. And actually, our Christmas card this past Christmas was not a picture of Santa Claus. It was a picture of me standing in the garden, these 2 big turnips. With huge leaves. This is life. This is the best life.
Gift.
I'll go back to the exercise. My epiphany was I was working a very difficult schedule at one time, so I'm getting up at 4:30 in the morning to go to the fitness center at work to work out before I started work. And literally with my hand on the car door one morning, I said, what am I doing? I could get on my bicycle, ride to work, which is about 4 miles, have that much exercise before I get there. I wouldn't have to get there as early to exercise in the gym, and then I'd get to ride back home at night to kind of relax. It takes a long time for some people to kind of get the message, that if what you're after is exercise. And I also found that, at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, the streets are a great place to ride a bicycle. That there's no one around. The only thing I had to worry about were the newspaper delivery people, because they were driving down the wrong side of the street looking out the window for the porches to throw the paper. But other than that, the streets were deserted, and I could do that at least 10 months a year without encountering much snow and ice. So since then, I haven't gone to the gym because it's right there in my basement.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sort of, you know, my daughter even, she's in her mid-50s, and she gets on her bicycle for an hour before work. She goes to work at 5:30 or something like that. And then she, bikes after work, and she looks in great shape. You know, just getting out there and doing biking. So is there some component of your work that tries to really encourage people to get more exercise?
Well, we've done a fair bit of work on trying to integrate public health and physical activity into our plans and planning. And so whenever we think about community design or community facilities and services and transportation infrastructure, we always are thinking about the public health aspects, and there's this it's a great as I said, we kind of rebuilt our landscape based on the automobile in the mid part of the 20th century, and it's just made it difficult to get around other ways. Because, little things you don't even think about. But like if you walk down a street and you see a store that you want to go into across a parking lot, and there's no way for the person to navigate their way across the parking lot, so we need to start thinking about, well, what are the missing pieces in our design of everything from individual sites to entire streetscapes that we need to put back in there to encourage people, because if those things are there, people will use them. Right now you say, nobody rides their bike along Northside Drive. They're like, yeah, well, that's a horrible place to ride your bike because it's not built for that. So we're trying to build facilities or infrastructure to make sure that it is, because if it's inviting, people will use it, and more and more people will use it. So so we think about that in our planning, and then in whenever there's a new project or development, we try to make sure that those things are considered.
Yeah. I know, Bill, you get some of your exercise from chopping wood.
Yeah, I've never liked to just exercise for no reason.
Yeah, right.
like your health isn't important, I guess. So I like to shovel snow, and I
come over to my house.
Yeah, sure,
You need a little more exercise.
Sure, I'll be right down. Gardening, cutting and splitting wood, and things like that. But that isn't a regular part of my daily life. They're like shovel a whole bunch of snow a few times a year. That's not really good exercise. And wood, I try to make kind of a year-round thing, picking away at that. But I don't get regular exercise, and that's a problem. But part of that is working from home most of the time, so I don't have to get exercise unless I try. So that's a real problem. But I've never enjoyed just sitting there on a machine or lifting weights or anything like that. I'm not earning anything from this. I'm not getting anything out of it. But I had a thought when you mentioned that when you build things, they'll use them, or making a nice bike path or something. I'll play the devil's advocate here. You can have great facilities, and people, if they don't have some push or need or drive or something. I've told a story before. One evening when I was in California, I was in Pleasant, in a very wealthy suburb in the San Francisco Bay area. one evening, I said, I'm going to go out for dinner. I was working out there. I said, I'll go out for dinner, but I'm not going to drive. I'm just going to walk. They've got these beautiful walkways that not just a straight sidewalk like we have. These are nice sweeping little islands with palms and nice, just a beautiful, beautiful, all of the shaped bushes and everything. It's a beautiful. So I walked about a mile along all these, the Chili's and all these nice little restaurants, and like, which one should I stop at? I walked about a mile down and a mile back and picked some place and sat there. And this was like 7 p.m. on a summer evening. Just a beautiful day. I didn't see one single person. This is in a city of like maybe 60,000 people. This amazing boulevard. It's like a Friday evening. Not a single person. Like they built this whole thing for nothing. I'm sure I wasn't the first person who ever walked it, but that was one underused thing, because it's just an absolute car. That's just the world of cars. Where nobody lives along there. It's nothing but restaurants, so nobody's close to it. They're all in the where people sleep, their homes, and then there's the business, and everything's divided up, and you drive back and forth in cars. Unlike the old cities like Brooklyn, where you live on the third floor, and you go down and there's bagel places and places to do this and that all around, and you can walk around. But Pleasanton, California, you're 6 miles from the businesses. You're out in the hills in your car. Nobody's living close to where they shop or work or anything.
Yeah.
Crazy
Well,
world.
that's the mindset that that has to change slowly over time, or hopefully
fast
more
over
more
time.
more. Not a lot of time left, so more quickly over time. But it's my profession, like planning, right? We certainly contributed to that problem, because there was this notion, not that long ago, that the best way to plan for future land use was to keep everything separate, to create residential zones and low density residential zones. And then we have all these places called commercial districts, or central business districts, no mention of residential in those areas. And we're trying to get away from that now and say, no, that shouldn't be a commercial district. That should be like a village district, where people live and work and shop all in the same area and recreate all in the same area. But we and it was related to the car, because we're like, well, we got a car, so we can have these nice, tree-lined suburban streets that are 5 miles away from that icky commercial stuff. But it was the way we were thinking at the time. But now it's like you said, you think, like, what are we missing out on? When we could instead of hopping in our car, just walk off our front porch and walk down a beautiful walkway to a restaurant, or kids go to school, whatever. So it's we mess things up. All right.
Yeah.
so we're trying to get some fresh perspective and support things that I think will be beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, I often think now, how do we get turned around here? And is it appropriate or possible to get into the high schools, get into the child's earlier education, and somehow convince them of the benefits of this kind of existence opposed to where we are now? Even to the point where sometimes when I was in the school board, I was wondering, are those trips to England and Germany and wherever else really teaching the kids the kind of things they need to master in order to have life go on in a positive manner? So I don't know, is it possible to intervene earlier on, even to the point where I'd say, well, maybe maybe we shouldn't be doing competitive sports. No, certainly the whole idea that you always have to have a winner. If you're not the winner, you're nothing, is a bad idea. And then the whole obsession with sports, we have, where, as I mentioned before, 100,000 people sit around and watch 25 people play football on the field. Do you have any idea of any kind of intervention or any kind of educational approach that could appropriately be used?
Bill has his hand up.
My broken record speech. The idea of moving fast enough and making big enough changes to where we're not using much gasoline pretty soon. That's obviously a very, very difficult task. And the idea of, say, going into schools and with the idea of teaching third graders that it's bad to use gas and they should that we should find something else to do, which we've kind of been doing a little bit of for a really long time now, and it hasn't really worked too much. I think that when you have a need, you do it. And people have done without gasoline before. During World War II, most of the world didn't have any gasoline at all. There was just no gas because gasoline was required by the military, and there were militaries all over the world. That's why it was called a World War. And the U.S. had some oil because we had so much oil at that time. We were Texas. We had lots of oil. So we rationed it, but we still had enough to live. But most of the world didn't have any gasoline to speak of. And they they started building cars that used wood, and they converted existing cars to run on wood. All over the world, wow. There were millions of cars running on wood during World War II. And what didn't work very well. It ruined the engines, it deforested countries. It was a bad idea, but they were desperate. What do you do? We have to, we could cut our gasoline use by like 3/4 overnight if we absolutely had to. But we still have to use some, just to survive. And so that was the mode they were in, and that's why they were cutting down all their trees and running their cars on wood. But that's the sort of thing that we could do if we had to. And to me, the only way that we'd have to give up gas is if we couldn't use it by making it really expensive, and that's called a carbon tax. If we were to slowly start increasing the cost of gas, not drastically enough to hurt people, but in a predictable way, like, wow, I don't think I'm going to buy that big old car because in about 4 years that's going to get really expensive to run, and then then at that point, do we get electric cars? Do we bike? Do we live closer to work? Do we work from home? Do we carpool? Do we do buses? There are all kinds of things but we'll have to do them, because the gas is we can't keep burning gas because it's getting too expensive. That, to me, that's the only way we can do it, because as long as gas costs $2.39 a gallon, we'll nod our heads and say, yeah, we should be using less of that, but not today. So that's my broken record.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to chime in on that because every time I get a chance to speak, I talk about that. Of course, what Bill is talking about is going to be decided soon in this state in the Transportation Climate Initiative, which is legislation whereby 12 states and the District of Columbia have agreed that they may artificially raise the price of gasoline by as much as 25 cents a gallon in order to decrease use of fossil fuels and use the proceeds from that to redistribute to try to overcome some of the energy burden that's suffered by poorer people when you charge more for energy. I really hope people will take a serious look at that when they're talking. Our legislators are going to decide about this program. We're going to, the administration and the legislature will have to pass a law to accept the conditions of the Transportation Climate Initiative. I hope when people read about this and look into it, they'll think about some of the things we talked about today in terms of what we have lost to a fossil fuel dependent society, or by becoming a fossil fuel dependent society. And really look at how this might be a step we could take to repair some of that damage that's been done, and to pave the way for a different kind of future that really might be a better way of life than what we've had for the last few years.
And you know, I would just say, you know, you talked about schools and you know, how can we get in there and you know, teach the kids about this stuff? And I was like, well, that's not unimportant. I would have to say we should be listening to the kids, because Greta Thunberg has taught us as adults a lot. She has had more effect on the way adults think, I think, over the last couple of years than adults have had on adults. So you know, let's pay attention to kids, because they know, they understand, they're thinking about their future, and you know, so let's listen to what they have to say, and let's do what needs to be done to make life better for everybody. And I have to put in a plug. It's like I'm not that down on competitive sports. I like sitting around and watching people who are good at something do it. It inspires me to get out and do something too, even if it's not so well.
Yeah, I find myself tuning in on all kind of video clips and
It's like, wow, how did they do that?
the Olympics and all that sort of thing. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for this inspiring program. I thought it was inspiring anyway. And any final words that anybody wants to toss in here? I think.
No, I'll second Bruce's comments on the Transportation and Climate Initiative. It's you know, it really is a significant opportunity for the state to invest in the types of things that'll really make a difference in our transportation systems. And I think you know, some of the opposition that's been expressed to it is because it might increase the cost of gas a little bit, and that would be bad for some folks. But I was like, well, you know, if we don't do something now, that in a way that's going to create some opportunities for people, then you know, 10 years from now, what are people going to say? Say, why didn't you do something when you had a chance? You know, so I think it's something that you know, needs to be debated, needs to be discussed, absolutely. But let's take a hard look at it.
Excellent. Well, thank you again. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
the conversation will continue.
All right. Thank you.